Alien girl ran to the human in tears. "Please, follow me home." But what he saw broke his heart. The relentless twin suns of Proxima Colony beat down on Matthew Lawrence's sweat-slicked shoulders as he rested against the rusted hull of an abandoned cargo hauler. His muscles ached from 12 hours of loading freight at the spaceport. Honest work that paid well enough for an Earthman trying to make his way on the frontier. Matthew took a long pull from his canteen, savoring the lukewarm water as it soothed his parched throat. The outskirts of New Haven settlement sprawled before him, a hodgepodge of prefab structures and makeshift dwellings where humans and a dozen alien species coexisted in what passed for harmony on this dusty rock. "Another day, another credit," he muttered, running a hand through his dark hair. 6 months on Proxima, and he was still adjusting to the longer days and lighter gravity. The extra muscle mass he'd built on Earth made him something of an anomaly among the colony's human population, and an object of fascination to some of the alien residents. The sound of rapid footfalls broke his reverie. Matthew turned to see a small figure racing toward him, kicking up puffs of reddish dust. As the figure drew closer, he recognized it as a young Ellerin girl, no more than 8 or 9 by human reckoning. Her pale lavender skin was smeared with dirt, her delicate white hair tangled and matted. What struck him most were her eyes, large, almond-shaped, and filled with unmistakable terror. "Whoa there," Matthew said, straightening as she skidded to a halt before him. "What's the rush, little one?" The girl's chest heaved with exertion. Tears cut clean tracks through the grime on her face. She reached out with tiny, trembling fingers and clutched at his hand. "Please," she gasped between sobs, her translator pendant flickering as it converted her native language. "Please, follow me home." Matthew knelt to her level, his brow furrowing. "Are you hurt? What's happened?" "Mother won't wake up," she whispered, tugging desperately at his arm. "Please help." "No one else will come." Matthew hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Lead the way." The girl's grip tightened as she pulled him through a maze of narrow alleys between ramshackle dwellings. They ventured into a section of the colony Matthew had never visited, a place where the buildings seemed to lean against each other for support, and the air hung heavy with unfamiliar spices and industrial runoff. "What's your name?" Matthew asked as they hurried along. "Neri," she replied without looking back. "Mother calls me Neri." They stopped before a small structure wedged between 2 larger buildings. The door hung askew on its hinges, and the exterior walls were patched with mismatched metal panels. Neri hesitated at the threshold, her small frame suddenly rigid with fear. "In there," she whispered. Matthew gently squeezed her shoulder. "Stay behind me, okay?" The stench hit him first, a sickly sweet odor mingled with decay and chemical residue. The interior was dark, illuminated only by the fading sunlight, filtering through a dirt-encrusted window. As his eyes adjusted, Matthew took in the squalor. Discarded food containers, broken furniture, and scattered hypodermic injectors littered the floor. In the center of the room lay an Ellerin woman, her lavender skin ashen, her limbs splayed at unnatural angles. A thin trickle of iridescent fluid had dried at the corner of her mouth. Near her outstretched hand, a crude pipe fashioned from salvaged tech components told the story Matthew had already pieced together. "Damn it," he breathed, checking for a pulse he knew wouldn't be there. The woman's skin was cold, her pupils fixed and dilated. She'd been dead for hours. Neri pushed past him, dropping to her knees beside the body. "Mother?" "I brought help. Please wake up." Matthew's heart constricted painfully in his chest. He'd seen this scene play out on Earth, in the forgotten corners of megacities where synthetic opioids claimed lives by the thousands. He never expected to find the same tragedy playing out on a colony world, with alien biochemistry but the same devastating results. "Neri," he said gently, placing a hand on her thin shoulder. "I'm sorry. Your mother, she's gone." The girl looked up at him, her large eyes uncomprehending. "But she'll wake up. She always wakes up." "Not this time, little one." Matthew swallowed hard against the lump forming in his throat. Neri's face crumpled. "I tried to help her. I did everything right. I was quiet when she needed quiet. I found food when she forgot." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I haven't eaten in 3 days." Matthew felt something break inside him, a dam of emotion he'd built since leaving Earth. He gathered the small alien child in his arms, her body frighteningly light against his chest. "It's not your fault," he said fiercely. "None of this is your fault." As Neri sobbed against his shoulder, Matthew surveyed the squalid room, rage and sorrow battling within him. What the hell was he supposed to do now? Colonial authorities would place the girl in some kind of system, likely understaffed and ill-equipped to handle traumatized children, especially non-humans. "I'm hungry," Neri whispered, her voice muffled against his shirt. "Then we'll get you food," Matthew replied without hesitation, "and we'll figure the rest out after that, I promise." He carried her out of that house of death, into the fading light of Proxima's sunset, with no plan beyond his next step, but an unshakable certainty that he wouldn't abandon this child to the indifferent machinery of colonial bureaucracy. Matthew sat across from Neri in a small corner booth of the Stellar Waypoint, a modest diner that catered to the diverse species of Proxima Colony. The establishment's human owner, Mac, had taken one look at the disheveled pair and wordlessly brought over 2 steaming plates without asking for payment. Neri devoured her food with the desperate intensity of the truly hungry. Matthew watched her, his own appetite diminished by the weight of memories pressing against his consciousness. "Slow down a bit," he advised gently. "You'll make yourself sick." The girl paused, lavender cheeks bulging, and nodded before forcing herself to take smaller bites. Her large eyes darted around the diner, taking in the various alien patrons with wary curiosity. "What happens now?" she asked between mouthfuls, her translator pendant converting her soft clicks and trills into standard English. Matthew ran a hand through his hair. "I need to report what happened to the colonial authority. They'll have procedures for—" "No!" Neri's fork clattered to the table. "They'll send me to the Juvenile Integration Center. Tavi from my learning pod went there when her parent died. She said the caretakers are mean to Ellerin children." Matthew frowned. "I'm sure they wouldn't. They made her sleep in the cold section because her body temperature was different," Neri insisted, "and they wouldn't let her have proper food. She got sick." The familiar burn of anger kindled in Matthew's chest. He'd seen similar institutional callousness on Earth, had experienced it firsthand after his parents died in the Chicago arcology collapse when he was 11. 3 years in the North American youth rehabilitation system had taught him exactly how little bureaucracies cared about individual children. "Please don't make me go there," Neri whispered, her large eyes glistening. "Finish your food," Matthew said quietly. "We'll figure something out." As Neri returned to her meal, Matthew's mind raced through options. He had a small apartment in the human sector, barely large enough for himself, let alone a child with different biological needs. His savings were modest, his knowledge of Elleran physiology non-existent. But the alternative— "You're in a spot of trouble, aren't you, son?" Matthew looked up to find Max standing beside their table, wiping his hands on a stained apron. The older man's weathered face held no judgment, only a knowing concern. "Just helping out a kid who needs it," Matthew replied cautiously. Mac nodded. "Elleran girl, about 8 standard years by the look of her. Mother was probably on drift, wasn't she?" Matthew tensed. "How did you—" "Been seeing more cases lately. Nasty stuff. Hits their nervous system differently than humans." Mac glanced at Neri, who was focused on scraping the last bits from her plate. "Colonial authorities overwhelmed. Their alien juvenile facilities are a damn disgrace." "So I've heard—" Mac leaned closer. "Look, I don't know what you're planning, but if you're thinking of helping her yourself, you'll need to file for emergency guardianship. There's a woman at the administrative complex, Nara Voss. Human, works in interspecies family services. Tell her Mac sent you." Matthew studied the older man. "Why are you helping us?" A shadow passed over Mac's face. "Lost my daughter in the Titan mining disaster. She left behind 2 half-Martian grandkids. System would have separated them if I hadn't fought like hell." He straightened. "Humans look after their own, and sometimes that means looking after others too." After Mac walked away, Matthew felt Neri's gaze on him. "What's emergency guardianship?" she asked. "It means I'd be responsible for you until—" Matthew trailed off, the enormity of what he was considering suddenly overwhelming. "Until we figure out something permanent." "Could I stay with you?" The question hung in the air between them, simple yet impossibly complex. Matthew had come to Proxima to escape his past, not to take on responsibility for a child, especially not an alien child with needs he barely understood. Yet looking at Neri's hopeful expression, he felt something shift inside him. "Let's take it one step at a time," he said finally. "First, we need to talk to this Nara Voss." The colonial administrative complex loomed over the central plaza of New Haven, its gleaming surfaces a stark contrast to the utilitarian structure surrounding it. Matthew approached the imposing building with Neri's small hand clutched in his, fighting the instinctive aversion to authority that had been ingrained in him since childhood. At the reception desk, a bored-looking human clerk barely glanced up from his terminal. "Purpose of visit?" "I need to speak with Nara Voss in Interspecies Family Services. It's urgent." The clerk's eyes flicked to Neri, then back to Matthew. "Relationship to the minor?" Matthew hesitated. "I found her. Her mother is deceased. Form 37B for reporting unaccompanied alien minors. Terminal 3. The clerk gestured vaguely toward a bank of screens. "I don't want to report her. I want to apply for emergency guardianship." The clerk's eyebrows rose. "That's unusual, especially for an Ellerin child." "Is Nara Voss available or not?" Matthew demanded, his patience wearing thin. The clerk sighed and tapped at his console. "Level 4, Office 412. But without prior documentation, you're wasting your time." As they walked away, Neri squeezed Matthew's hand. "Are you angry?" Matthew forced himself to relax his clenched jaw. "Not at you. Sometimes bureaucracy just reminds me of things I'd rather forget." "Bad things?" she asked, her translator struggling with the nuance. "Things that made me who I am," Matthew replied, stepping into the elevator. "For better or worse." Office 412 was smaller than Matthew had expected. The walls lined with holographic displays showing families of mixed species, humans with various alien partners and children. Behind a desk cluttered with data tablets sat Nara Voss, a woman in her mid-40s with steel gray hair, cropped short, and intelligent eyes that assessed Matthew and Neri the moment they entered. "Max sent you?" she stated rather than asked, gesturing for them to sit. "He has a habit of finding strays." Matthew bristled at the term, but kept his expression neutral as he guided Neri to a chair. "Her name is Neri. Her mother died of an overdose, and she has no one else." Nara's gaze softened as she looked at the Ellerin child. "I'm sorry for your loss, little one." She tapped a sequence on her desk console, and a small drawer slid open. "Would you like a nutrient stick? It's formulated for Ellerin physiology." Neri glanced at Matthew, who nodded encouragingly. She took the offered snack with a whispered thanks. "So," Nara said, turning her attention back to Matthew, "you want emergency guardianship of an Ellerin child? Do you have any idea what you're asking for?" "I know it won't be easy. It will be nearly impossible," Nara interrupted. "Ellerins have specific biological needs. Their emotional development follows different patterns than human children. Their cultural expectations..." She shook her head. "And that's before we get to the Ellerin Preservation Society, who will fight tooth and nail against any human guardian." Matthew leaned forward. "She was living in squalor with an addict mother. Where was this Preservation Society then?" "Fair point," Nara conceded, "but they're politically powerful, and they'll argue that Neri belongs with her own kind." "And what does Neri want?" Matthew asked, glancing at the girl who was quietly nibbling her nutrient stick. Nara's expression shifted subtly. "You're different than I expected. Most emergency guardian applicants are looking for the stipend, not asking about the child's preferences." She studied him more carefully. "What's your stake in this, Mr. Lawrence?" "Matthew Lawrence. And I don't have a stake. She asked for help, and I'm trying to give it." Nara tapped her stylus against the desk. "Mr. Lawrence, there's something else you should know. Neri's mother, Ela Tarn, was flagged in our system." She lowered her voice. "Colonial security believes she was involved with the drift trade." Matthew tensed. "Involved how?" "Possibly as a courier. Drift is manufactured by a cartel run by a coalition of Vexari and Krell smugglers. They target vulnerable populations, especially in the alien sectors." Nara glanced at Neri, who appeared absorbed in her snack, but whose large ears had tilted slightly in their direction. "If Ela knew something valuable..." "You think Neri might be in danger?" Matthew concluded, his protective instincts flaring. "It's a possibility we can't ignore." Nara hesitated. "There's also the matter of your qualifications. Do you know anything about Elloren culture or physiology? Matthew shook his head reluctantly. Nothing beyond the basics. Then you'll need a cultural liaison, someone from the Elloren community who can guide you. Nara's fingers danced across her console. There's an Elloren cultural educator named Thela Vin who works with interspecies families. She's traditional, but fair. Will she help a human? She believes in what's best for the child, regardless of species. Nara's console chimed. I've sent her your information. If, and it's a big if, you're serious about this, you'll need to meet with her immediately. Matthew felt Neri's small hand slip into his. I'm serious. Nara studied them for a long moment before nodding. Then I'll process the emergency application. It gives you 72 hours of provisional guardianship while we assess the situation. She fixed Matthew with a stern look. During that time, you'll need to demonstrate basic competency in Elloren childcare, secure appropriate accommodations, and pass a background check. My background might be complicated, Matthew admitted. Everyone's is, Nara replied with a hint of a smile. What matters is who you are now. She handed him a data chip. This contains temporary authorization and basic information on Elloren needs. Thela will contact you within the hour. As they stood to leave, Nara added, one more thing, Mr. Lawrence. If there's any connection between Ela Tarn and the Drift Cartel, be careful. These aren't people you want attention from. Outside the administrative complex, Matthew felt the weight of his decision settling on his shoulders. Neri looked up at him, her large eyes reflecting the colony's artificial lighting. Are you my guardian now? She asked. Temporarily, Matthew replied. We still have a lot to figure out. His comm unit beeped with an incoming message. Coordinates for a meeting with Thela Vin at a location in the Elloren district. We're going to meet someone who can help us understand each other better, Matthew explained, guiding Neri toward the transit station. The Elloren district was a stark contrast to the utilitarian human sector. Structures curved organically, their surfaces adorned with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed gently in the evening light. Matthew felt conspicuously out of place among the slender, lavender-skinned inhabitants who regarded him with undisguised curiosity. Neri, however, walked with her head high for the first time since he'd met her. It smells like home, she said softly. The coordinates led them to a small educational center. Inside, a tall Elloren female with elaborate silver markings on her lavender skin waited, her posture rigid with disapproval. So, Thela Vin said, her translator rendering her musical language into clip standard, you are the human who presumes to care for one of our children. I don't presume anything, Matthew replied evenly, meeting Thela Vin's stern gaze. I'm trying to help a child who has no one else. The Elloren educator's silver-marked face remained impassive, but her ear membranes fluttered slightly, a subtle tell Matthew couldn't interpret. She circled him slowly, her flowing garments whispering against the polished floor. Humans, she said, the word carrying a weight of history, always believe their intentions justify their actions. She knelt to Neri's level, speaking in their native tongue, musical clicks and trills that bypassed the translation devices. Neri responded hesitantly, her small hands making graceful gestures that complemented her speech. The conversation continued for several minutes while Matthew stood awkwardly by, completely excluded from their exchange. Finally, Thela rose. Neri tells me you have been kind, that you promised food and safety when others ignored her. Her large, iridescent eyes narrowed. But kindness alone is insufficient. An Elloren child has needs a human cannot intuitively understand. Then teach me, Matthew said simply. Thela's head tilted, the gesture accentuating the elegant curve of her neck. It is not so simple as a few lessons, human. Our biology, our cultural imperatives, our spiritual practices, these are the foundation of a child's development. I'm a quick study. Are you? Thela's tone sharpened. Then let us begin. First test. Neri requires sustenance appropriate to her physiology. You have 1 hour to procure a proper Elloren evening meal without assistance. I will remain with her here. Matthew blinked. You're testing me now? Did you expect a convenient schedule for your cultural education? Thela's mouth curved in what might have been amusement. Parenting offers no such luxury. Recognizing the challenge for what it was, Matthew nodded. 1 hour, proper Elloren evening meal. Any hints? That would defeat the purpose. Thela gestured toward the door. The clock starts now. Outside, Matthew fought down a surge of frustration. The Aloran district sprawled around him, its organic architecture and unfamiliar signage suddenly intimidating. He had no idea what constituted proper Aloran food, let alone where to find it. Taking a deep breath, he approached an elderly Aloran male arranging bioluminescent plants outside a small shop. "Excuse me," Matthew began. "I need to find appropriate food for an Aloran child's evening meal. Could you direct me?" The elder regarded him with suspicion. Why would a human need such information? "I'm caring for an orphaned girl," Matthew explained, conscious of the minutes ticking by. "It's complicated." Something in his expression must have conveyed his sincerity, because the elder's demeanor softened slightly. "2 streets east, look for the establishment with azure light patterns. Tell Marin that Paul sent you." Matthew thanked him and hurried through the winding streets, drawing curious stares from Aloran passers-by. He found the shop, more of a small greenhouse than a store by human standards, and was greeted by a young female Aloran with intricate blue markings. "Paul sent me," Matthew said breathlessly. "I need a proper evening meal for an Aloran child." Marin's surprise was evident, but she asked practical questions about the child's age and clan markings before assembling a collection of items: phosphorescent fruits, what appeared to be protein-rich tubers, and a small container of clear liquid that smelled faintly of cinnamon. "The nectar must be warmed precisely to body temperature," she instructed as Matthew paid with his credit chip. "Too hot or cold will cause digestive distress." "How do I know when it's right?" Marin hesitated, then reached out to touch his wrist. "Like this, when it feels like the pulse point of your skin." Matthew nodded, grateful for the specific instruction. "Thank you." "You are doing something unusual," Marin observed, "but not without precedent. There was a human doctor during the Proxima Plague who saved many Aloran children when our own healers had given up." With the carefully packaged meal, Matthew made it back to the educational center with 12 minutes to spare. Thela watched critically as he arranged the food according to Marin's instructions, warming the nectar using a small heating element she provided. "You sought help," Thela noted, observing the presentation. "I sought information," Matthew corrected. "There's a difference between asking for guidance and expecting others to solve your problems." A flicker of what might have been approval crossed Thela's face, a distinction many failed to recognize. She gestured for Neri to eat. The girl approached the meal cautiously, glancing between the 2 adults. She sampled each item, her expression brightening as she tasted the warm nectar. "It's like how Mother made it before," she said softly. Thela nodded. "Acceptable, human. You have passed the first test." She gestured to a seating area. "While Neri eats, we will discuss the second challenge." As they sat, Matthew noticed a small holographic display on Thela's wrist. A smiling Aloran man with a human woman, both holding a lavender-skinned child between them. "Your family?" he asked. Thela's hand jerked, deactivating the display. "My sister's family," she corrected, her voice suddenly tight. "She married a human diplomat. Against our parents' wishes, against my counsel." "You disapproved." "I feared for her," Thela said quietly. Interspecies relationships face difficulties. Cultural misunderstandings that seem insignificant become chasms over time. Yet you help families like theirs now. Thela's gaze drifted to Neri. "My sister died 3 cycles ago. Her human husband continues to raise their daughter according to our ways, despite the challenges. He proved me wrong." Her attention returned to Matthew, sharper than before. "But he was exceptional. Most humans lack his dedication." "I'm not most humans," Matthew said. "So you claim—" Thela leaned forward. "Your second test. Aloran children require specific sleep conditions. You must prepare appropriate accommodations by tomorrow morning. Additionally, you must learn and perform the ritual of peaceful rest, a ceremony essential to Aloran childhood development." Matthew nodded, accepting the challenge. "And the third test? Will be revealed after you complete the second." Thela's expression softened almost imperceptibly as she watched Neri eating. She has suffered much. Her mother's addiction, her isolation, these leave marks on a child's spirit. "On Earth we have a saying," Matthew offered. "It takes a village to raise a child." Perhaps, Thala replied. Our peoples have more in common than I first assumed. She rose gracefully. Return tomorrow at first light. We will evaluate your preparations and continue your education. As Matthew and Neri left the educational center, the girl slipped her small hand into his. Did I do well? She asked anxiously. You did perfectly, Matthew assured her, squeezing her hand gently. How do you feel about staying at my apartment tonight? It's small, but we'll make it work. Neri nodded, her large eyes reflecting the bioluminescent lights of her cultural district. Thala says you're trying very hard. She doesn't think you'll succeed, but… She looked up at him with unexpected confidence. I think you will. Matthew's apartment in the human sector was utilitarian at best, a single room with a small kitchen alcove and bathroom. He'd never minded its limitations before, but now, watching Neri take in the sparse furnishings, he saw it through new eyes. It's not much, he admitted, but we'll make it work for tonight. Neri nodded, her large eyes taking in every detail. Where will I sleep? That's our first project, Matthew said, pulling up information on his datapad about Aloran's sleep requirements. According to the files Nara had provided, Alorans required higher humidity and ambient temperature than humans, plus a semi-reclined position due to their unique spinal structure. Matthew improvised, creating a sleeping nest from his spare bedding on the small couch. He adjusted the environmental controls to increase humidity and warmth in that corner of the room, using a small space heater for additional comfort. Is this okay? He asked as Neri tested the arrangement. It's missing the sleep chimes, she said hesitantly, and the bioluminescent night lamp. Matthew frowned. I don't have those. We need to get them, Neri insisted, or I'll have bad dreams. Mother always said the chimes keep the shadow spirits away. Matthew checked the time. Most shops would be closed, but he remembered passing an all-night market near the transit hub that catered to various species. Let's go shopping, he decided. As they left the apartment building, Matthew noticed a figure across the street quickly turn away. A Vexari male with distinctive ridge markings. Something about the alien's posture triggered Matthew's instincts, honed from years of living in Earth's rougher districts. Stay close, he murmured to Neri, taking a deliberately indirect route to the market. The night market buzzed with activity despite the late hour, its stalls illuminated by harsh, artificial lighting. Matthew kept Neri's small hand firmly in his while scanning for anything resembling Aloran sleep aids. They found a stall selling interspecies comfort items, but the prices were exorbitant. Can I help you find something specific? Matthew turned to find a familiar face. Marin from the food shop, her blue markings glowing softly in the market's harsh light. Marin? What are you doing here? Many Alorans work night shifts at the spaceport, she explained. Our shops adjust accordingly. She knelt to Neri's level. Hello again, little one. Are you settling in with your human guardian? Neri nodded shyly. He's trying to make me a proper sleep nest, but we don't have chimes or a night lamp. Marin's expression softened. Those are important. She glanced at Matthew. You're taking Thala's tests seriously. I don't have much choice, Matthew replied. Marin studied him for a moment. No, I suppose you don't. She straightened. Come with me. These market prices are robbery. She led them to a small shop tucked between larger establishments, its entrance marked only by subtle bioluminescent patterns. Inside, the atmosphere immediately shifted to something more organic and soothing. My personal shop, Marin explained. I specialize in cultural transition items. As she gathered sleep chimes and a small lamp, Matthew noticed a holographic display similar to the one he'd glimpsed on Thala's wrist. You're Thala's niece, he realized, the daughter of her sister and the human diplomat. Marin paused, then nodded. Yes, though Aunt Thala prefers not to discuss it. She handed Neri the lamp, which emitted a gentle blue glow. She took my mother's death very hard. She mentioned your father continues to raise you according to Aloran customs. He does. Marin's expression warmed. He believes honoring both halves of my heritage is important. Aunt Thala didn't think he could do it, but he proved her wrong. She glanced at Matthew. Perhaps you will too. As Marin packaged their purchases, refusing payment despite Matthew's protests, he asked, Any advice for passing Thala's next test? The ritual of peaceful rest is simple in action, but complex in meaning, Marin explained. It's not just about the words or gestures, it's about creating a sense of security. She demonstrated the hand movements, like this, while reciting the ancestral protection verse. Matthew practiced the motions until Marin nodded in approval. "Thank you," he said sincerely, "for everything." "Humans have a saying about villages raising children," Marin replied with a smile. "Ellerans have a similar belief." Outside, the streets had grown quieter. Matthew remained alert, scanning for the Vexari he'd spotted earlier. They were halfway back to his apartment when he spotted movement in an alley ahead. Two figures with the distinctive silhouettes of Krell enforcers. "Change of plans," Matthew murmured, steering Neri down a side street. "We're taking the long way home." "Are those bad people?" Neri whispered, her grip tightening on his hand. "Just people we don't need to meet tonight," Matthew replied, keeping his tone light despite the tension coiling in his gut. They made it back to the apartment without incident, but Matthew's unease remained. While Neri arranged her new sleep items in the nest he'd created, he secured the door and windows, then sent a brief message to Naravos about the possible surveillance. By the time he finished, Neri was settled in her sleep nest, the chimes creating gentle, melodic tones, while the lamp cast soothing patterns across the ceiling. "Will you do the ritual?" she asked sleepily. Matthew knelt beside her, performing the hand gestures Marin had taught him while reciting the protection verse. The words felt strange on his tongue, but Neri's expression of contentment made the effort worthwhile. He had just finished when Neri suddenly stiffened, her eyes widening in alarm. Her lavender skin paled to an ashen gray, and her breathing became rapid and shallow. "Neri!" "What's wrong?" Matthew asked, panic rising in his chest. "I can see her," Neri whispered, her gaze fixed on empty space. "Mother is calling me to join her in the Shadow Realm." Matthew recognized the symptoms from Nara's information packet, a stress response unique to Elleran children, a form of waking nightmare triggered by trauma. Without proper intervention, it could escalate to dangerous levels. "Neri, focus on me," Matthew said firmly, taking her small hands in his. "Your mother isn't here. You're safe." But Neri's condition worsened, her skin growing colder by the second. Matthew's mind raced through the limited information he'd absorbed about Elleran physiology. They responded to physical contact differently than humans. Their skin contained receptors that processed emotional states through touch. Acting on instinct, Matthew gathered Neri into his arms, holding her against his chest where she could feel his steady heartbeat. He continued the ritual gestures with one hand while maintaining the protective embrace. "You're safe," he repeated. "I've got you." Gradually, Neri's breathing steadied. Color returned to her skin as she relaxed against him. "She's gone," Neri murmured eventually. "You made the shadows go away." "That's my job now," Matthew said softly, continuing to hold her until she drifted into sleep. He was easing her back into her nest when his comm unit vibrated with an incoming message. It was from Thala Vin and contained only 4 words. "We need to talk." Matthew had just settled Neri back into her sleep nest when the soft chime of his apartment's security system announced a visitor. On the monitor, he saw Thala Vin, her normally composed features tight with urgency. He opened the door to find her clutching a small data crystal, her silver markings luminescent with stress, an Elleran physiological response he'd read about but never witnessed. "You should have contacted me immediately when she had the shadow vision," Thala said without preamble, brushing past him into the apartment. Matthew frowned. "How did you know about that?" "Marin called me after you left her shop. She sensed Neri's distress." Thala moved to the sleeping child, her long fingers hovering over Neri's forehead without touching. "The bond is already forming. Stronger than I anticipated." "What bond?" Thala straightened, studying Matthew with new intensity. "You calmed her shadow vision without training. How?" "Instinct," Matthew replied. "She needed to feel safe, so I held her." "And it worked." Thala's tone held wonder and confusion in equal measure. A human with no knowledge of our ways successfully navigated an Elleran trauma response. She paced the small apartment, her flowing garments whispering against the furniture. "This complicates everything." "What does?" Matthew demanded, his patience wearing thin. "And why are you here at this hour?" Thala stopped, her large eyes reflecting the soft glow of Neri's night lamp. "You're being watched. The cartel knows you have Neri." "I noticed," Matthew said grimly. Vexari and Krell enforcers. What do they want with her? Thala held up the data crystal. This is why I came. Elatarn wasn't just an addict. She was trying to escape. She lowered her voice. She worked as a data clerk for a shipping company controlled by the cartel. When she discovered evidence of their operations, she tried to blackmail them for enough money to leave Proxima with Neri. And they killed her for it, Matthew concluded. Not intentionally. The drift they gave her was contaminated, a warning that became a death sentence. Thala's expression hardened. But Ela was clever. She hid the real evidence somewhere only Neri would know. Matthew glanced at the sleeping child. She hasn't mentioned anything like that. Because she doesn't know she knows, Thala explained. Ela would have encoded it in something meaningful to Neri. A toy, a song, a bedtime story. Matthew processed this information, the protective instinct that had been growing since he first met Neri intensifying. So these cartel thugs think she can lead them to evidence that could destroy their operation. Yes, and they won't hesitate to take her. Thala's voice caught. I've seen what happens to children in their custody. The raw emotion in her tone made Matthew look at her more closely. This is personal for you. Thala hesitated, then nodded. Before I became an educator, I worked with refugee children. Many had parents who fell into the cartel's debt. Her elegant hands clenched. I couldn't save them all. The vulnerability in her admission shifted something between them. For the first time, Matthew saw beyond her stern exterior to the passionate advocate beneath. There's something else you should know, Thala continued, moving closer to Neri. What happened tonight, the way you calmed her shadow vision, it's significant. Ellerans form deep psycho-emotional connections called soul kinships. They usually develop between blood relatives, but occasionally. She met Matthew's eyes. Occasionally, they form across species boundaries when a profound need meets a profound response. You're saying Neri and I have formed this soul kinship? The beginning of one, Thala confirmed. It's rare, but not unprecedented. My sister and her human husband shared such a bond. Her voice softened. It's why he could raise their daughter so successfully after her death. The bond transcended cultural differences. Matthew sat heavily on the edge of his bed. So what does this mean for Neri's guardianship? It means separating you could harm her psychologically. Thala's expression was complex. Professional concern mingled with something more personal. And it means I was wrong about you, Matthew Lawrence. The use of his first name, spoken in her musical accent, created an unexpected warmth in his chest. You've passed all my tests, she continued. The meal, the sleep preparations, and most importantly, your instinctive response to her crisis. You've demonstrated more understanding of Aloran needs than many of our own people would with a human child. Before Matthew could respond, Neri stirred in her sleep nest, whimpering softly. Both adults moved toward her simultaneously, their hands brushing as they reached to comfort her. The contact sent a jolt of awareness through Matthew. Thala's skin was warmer than a human's, with a subtle texture that reminded him of velvet. Their eyes met over Neri's sleeping form, and Matthew saw his own protective instinct mirrored in Thala's gaze, along with something else, an unmistakable flicker of attraction that transcended species differences. Neri settled without fully waking, and Thala slowly withdrew her hand from beneath Matthew's. We should let her rest, she murmured. They moved to the kitchen alcove, speaking in hushed tones. What's our next move? Matthew asked. We need to discover what evidence Ela hid and get it to Colonial Security before the cartel realizes we have it. Thala's expression grew troubled. But first, we need a safer location. My residence in the Aloran district has better security. You're inviting us to stay with you? Thala's silver markings shimmered slightly, the Aloran equivalent of a blush. It's the logical solution. My home has proper accommodations for Neri, and the cartel is less likely to act aggressively in the Aloran district. And the fact that you've decided I'm not a cultural barbarian after all? Matthew asked with a hint of a smile. That simplifies matters, Thala admitted, her usual formality slipping. I've misjudged humans before. My sister always said my prejudice was my greatest flaw. We all have blind spots, Matthew said. On Earth, I avoided responsibility. Came to Proxima to escape my past. He glanced at Neri. Funny how life finds ways to make you face yourself. The honesty of his admission created a moment of connection between them. Thala moved closer, her height nearly matching his. "Humans are surprising," she said softly. "Your adaptability, your instinctive compassion, these are qualities my people sometimes forget in our adherence to tradition." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibility. Matthew became acutely aware of her presence, the subtle scent of exotic flowers, the graceful curve of her neck, the intelligence in her large eyes. A sudden noise from outside the apartment shattered the moment. Matthew moved to the security monitor to see two Krell enforcers in the corridor, attempting to override the door lock. "They've found us," he said grimly, reaching for the stunner he kept in a drawer. "We need to leave. Now!" "Take Neri," Matthew whispered urgently, passing the still drowsy child to Thala. "The service corridor connects to the maintenance tunnels. I'll hold them off." Thala's eyes widened. "You can't face two Krell enforcers alone." "I'm not planning to fight them," Matthew replied, grabbing Neri's sleep chimes and lamp. "Just delay them. Go." As Thala slipped through the service door with Neri, Matthew quickly rearranged the apartment to make it appear they'd left in a hurry. He overturned furniture, left the main door unlocked, and positioned himself behind it just as the Krell overrode the security system. The two hulking aliens burst in, their scaled hides gleaming under the apartment's lights. Matthew waited until they were fully inside before slipping out behind them, slamming the door and jamming the manual lock with his utility knife. Their enraged roars followed him as he sprinted down the corridor to the maintenance access where Thala waited with Neri clutched against her chest. "That won't hold them long," Matthew said, leading them into the dimly lit tunnels that ran beneath the residential complex. "Where are we going?" Neri asked, her voice small but remarkably steady. "Somewhere safe," Matthew assured her, navigating the labyrinthine passages with the confidence of someone who'd spent a lifetime finding escape routes in hostile environments. They emerged into a service alley 2 blocks from Matthew's apartment. The colony's night cycle was in full effect, the streets nearly deserted as they made their way toward the Ellerin district, taking a circuitous route to avoid main thoroughfares. "How did you know about those tunnels?" Thala asked as they paused in a shadowed doorway, checking for pursuers. "On Earth, I grew up in the Chicago arcology after my parents died," Matthew explained, his voice low. "You learned the back ways or you didn't survive." Thala's expression softened. "You've been a survivor your whole life." "Until now," Matthew replied, his gaze shifting to Neri. "Now I have someone else to think about." They continued through the darkened colony, Neri growing heavier in Thala's arms. Matthew took the child from her, cradling Neri against his chest as they crossed into the Ellerin district. Thala's home was nestled within a cluster of organically shaped dwellings, its exterior illuminated by subtle bioluminescent patterns. Inside, the space opened into a warm, inviting environment that immediately felt more like a home than Matthew's sterile apartment ever had. "The guest chamber is prepared," Thala said, leading them to a room with a proper Ellerin sleep platform. "It will be more comfortable for Neri than your improvised nest." Matthew settled the drowsy child onto the platform, arranging her sleep chimes and lamp. Neri clutched at his hand before he could withdraw. "My music box," she murmured. "I need my special music box." Matthew and Thala exchanged a significant look. "What music box, little one?" Thala asked gently. "The one Mother gave me, with the dancing starlights." Neri's eyes were already closing. "She said it would always protect me." "We'll get it for you," Matthew promised, completing the ritual of peaceful rest as Neri drifted back to sleep. In Thala's living area, they spoke in hushed tones. "The evidence," Thala said. "It must be in this music box." Matthew nodded. "We need to go back to Ila's home. Too dangerous. The cartel will be watching it now." "Then we'll need help." Matthew activated his comm unit. "Naravos can coordinate with Colonial Security, and Mac, he has connections throughout the colony." As Matthew made the calls, Thala prepared a restorative tea, her movements graceful in the soft light of her home. When she handed him a steaming cup, their fingers brushed, lingering longer than necessary. "You continue to surprise me, Matthew Lawrence," she said softly. "Most humans would have abandoned Neri to the system. Few would risk their lives for an alien child." "Maybe I'm not most humans," he replied, echoing his earlier words, but with new meaning. "No," Thala agreed, her silver markings shimmering with emotion. "You are decidedly not." The space between them seemed charged with possibility, But before either could act, Matthew's comm unit chimed. Nara had arranged a security team to retrieve the music box from Hila's home. They would deliver it within the hour. As they waited, the adrenaline of their escape began to fade, leaving Matthew acutely aware of Thela's presence. She moved around her home, securing doors and windows, her flowing garments accentuating the elegant lines of her body. "Your home is beautiful," Matthew said, breaking the charged silence. "It's been solitary," Thela replied, her gaze meeting his. "Until now." The admission hung between them, an invitation neither was quite ready to voice. Instead, they spoke of practical matters: Neri's guardianship, the evidence against the cartel, the future they might build together. When the music box arrived, a delicate creation of iridescent shell and metal that projected star-like patterns when opened, they discovered a data crystal hidden in its base, containing shipping manifests and financial records that implicated high-ranking colonial officials in the drift trade. "This will dismantle their entire operation," Thela breathed, examining the files. "Hila's sacrifice won't be in vain." With the evidence secured and transmitted to colonial security, the immediate danger passed. In the quiet aftermath, Matthew found himself standing with Thela on her home's small balcony, overlooking the bioluminescent gardens of the Aloran district. "What happens now?" he asked, watching the play of light across her silver-marked features. "The formal guardianship hearing is in 3 days," Thela replied. "With the soul kinship forming and my endorsement as cultural liaison, there should be no obstacles." "And after that?" Thela turned to face him fully. "Aloran tradition holds that a child's guardians should share a dwelling. For stability," her markings shimmered. "It would be logical for you to remain here. With Neri. With me." The invitation in her words was unmistakable. Matthew stepped closer, drawn by something deeper than physical attraction, a recognition of kindred spirits across the boundaries of species and culture. "Is that what you want?" he asked, his voice low. "What I want," Thela said, her musical accent more pronounced with emotion, "is to explore this unexpected connection between us. Humans call it chemistry, I believe." "Among other things," Matthew murmured, reaching up to trace the silvery markings along her cheekbone. Thela's skin warmed beneath his touch, her pupils dilating in the Aloran expression of desire. "My sister once told me that loving across species boundaries requires courage, that the rewards justify the challenges." "Your sister was wise," Matthew said, drawing her closer. Their first kiss was tentative, an exploration of alien territory for both, but the second was not. Cultural differences melted away as ancient instincts took over, guiding them through the discovery of each other's bodies with wonder and increasing urgency. Later, as they lay entwined in Thela's sleeping chamber, the bioluminescent patterns of her skin casting a gentle glow over them both, Matthew marveled at how quickly life could change. 6 days ago, he had been alone, adrift in the colony with no purpose beyond survival. Now he had a child to protect, a woman to love, and a future brighter than any he could have imagined on Earth. "You're thinking very loudly," Thela murmured against his chest. "Just wondering what Neri will think of all this," Matthew replied, stroking the silken length of her white hair. "She already knows," Thela said with a smile. "Aloran children are quite perceptive about emotional bonds. She asked me yesterday if you would be my mate, as well as her guardian." Matthew laughed softly. "Smart kid." "Indeed." Thela propped herself up to look at him. "The cartel leaders will be arrested by morning. Neri will be safe. We can build something meaningful here, a family that transcends species." "Humanity's greatest strength," Matthew said thoughtfully, "not our technology or our resilience, but our capacity to find family wherever we go in the universe." 3 months later, Matthew stood in the colonial administrative complex, Neri's small hand in his, Thela at his side. Nara Voss presented them with the final guardianship documents, making official what their hearts had known since that first desperate day when a frightened alien child had pleaded, "Please, follow me home." "Congratulations," Nara said with a genuine smile. "You've created something special here, a bridge between cultures that others will follow." As they left the complex, Neri skipping between them, Matthew reflected on the strange path that had led him here. A chance encounter, a heartbreaking discovery, a courageous choice, all culminating in this moment of perfect belonging. "What are you thinking?" Thela asked, her fingers intertwining with his. Matthew smiled, watching Neri dance ahead of them, her lavender skin glowing with health and happiness. I'm thinking that sometimes the universe knows exactly what our hearts need, even before we do. A very human sentiment, Thela teased. Maybe, Matthew agreed, pulling her close for a kiss that drew curious stares from passers-by. But I think you like that about us.